Welcome to NYNJPA Weather, your severe weather source for the Northern Mid-Atlantic. I'm your meteorologist, Stephen DiMartino, and we have a lot to talk about this morning. We're going to start this morning off the Florida coast, where we have Tropical Storm Bret developing just to the north of the Bahamas. Now, this tropical storm is expected to move to the northeast and remain over the Atlantic Ocean. However, I would not be surprised if Bret decides to meander a bit off the southeast coast and try to make a run up the coast if the trough that will be moving off of the east coast tonight does not pick up Bret and force it into the Atlantic. Otherwise, Bret will continue to slowly develop and intensify. Winds are currently at 50 miles per hour as of 9:30 this morning, and the tropical storm is moving to the northeast at around 5 miles per hour. Pressure has dropped down to 1001 millibars, and I expect it to continue to strengthen and deepen through the afternoon and evening hours. Will Bret become a hurricane? There's an outside shot it could, especially if Bret remains over the Gulf Stream, which is a very warm area of water. Water temperatures are around 89, 90 degrees, which obviously is very warm, which could allow Bret to intensify, especially with a lot of the upper level environment around Bret improving, with the wind shear backing off and with the dry air starting to work away from the tropical system. So there is a chance that Bret can still develop, but I think that Bret for the most part will remain over the Atlantic and will not be a significant threat. Probably will enhance the wave heights along much of the east coast, though, as Bret moves into the central Atlantic. Back to our neck of the woods. We have a rather interesting setup over the northeast and northern mid-Atlantic for this afternoon and evening. These brighter cloud tops are associated with thunderstorms in what's called a mesoscale convective system, basically a cluster of thunderstorms that has developed and is now dropping to the south and east. Now, what's interesting here is that over the New York City and Philadelphia metropolitan area, we are obviously very warm and very humid. So you would think, wow, these thunderstorms are going to remain rather strong and drop to the south. But that's not exactly the case. The problem here is that the mid-levels, where basically from about 950 millibars up to 500 millibars, or the center part of the thunderstorm, is very warm as well. In fact, it's practically stable. And what that leads to is the thunderstorms weakening and basically becoming more of a heavy rain event rather than a severe thunderstorm threat. Of course, it could go the other way. If these thunderstorms produce enough lifting and break the cap, the warm mid-level atmosphere, and forces those warmer temperatures into the upper atmosphere, where it's far colder, then these thunderstorms can remain very strong to severe. So we're keeping an eye on that as these thunderstorms drop south. And these thunderstorms are dropping south because of a cold front on the edge of the satellite picture over parts of eastern Canada around Quebec and Ontario is going to attempt to drop south. The problem here is that this cold front really doesn't have much in the way of support. The trough associated with this cold front is already starting to lift to the northeast into the Atlantic. And the cold front that's going to drop south is going to weaken as a result, as the majority of the colder air remains over New England and eastern Canada. In fact, there really won't be much of a change behind this cold front aside from a slight dip in the dew points. So by tomorrow afternoon, the air mass will feel a little bit drier, but still very warm with temperatures in the 80s and 90s. So what we're going to have to watch out for this afternoon is for these thunderstorms well ahead of this cold front to drop south, producing very heavy rainfall, strong wind gusts, some frequent lightning depending on how strong these thunderstorms remain, and of course, small hail. If the thunderstorms weaken, the only real threat we're going to be dealing with is very heavy rainfall, because once the heavy rainfall develops, it will cool the lower portions of the atmosphere, so that becomes stable. The mid-levels of the atmosphere remains warm, so that's stable. So we just pretty much end up with a heavy rain event with a few strong thunderstorms. If the thunderstorms are able to create enough lifting to remain severe, then we're going to deal with very strong wind gusts over 50 miles per hour, possibly reaching 60 to 65 miles per hour, and very heavy rainfall and a lot of frequent lightning. So this setup has a potential going either way of either not being a big deal or being a significant impact. Either way, expect rain for this afternoon and evening, so if you're going out to the Mets game, be prepared for a nice little rain delay. What about the rest of the week? As I stated earlier, the cold front that drops south pretty much collapses and weakens. And what we're going to be setting up basically from Thursday on through this coming weekend is what's called a Bermuda high pressure system type pattern. Basically what this means is that we have our high pressure system anchored around Bermuda or just to the east of Bermuda. And as a result, we get a strong south to southwesterly flow from the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean right up the East Coast, which means that our temperatures get very hot. We're looking at high temperatures in the mid to upper 90s for many locations, could break a few 100s, and lows only falling into the mid 70s in many locations. Meanwhile, the dew points are going to be in the 70s as well, and that means the heat index for Thursday, Friday, and possibly even Saturday will break 100 degrees. Very oppressive heat. Stay indoors if you can, and if you're outside, drink plenty of fluids. Now you notice there's these little weak areas of low pressure over parts of Canada. That's associated with a stationary front, and that stationary front will try to send a few weak disturbances through this air mass, so I can't rule out a few isolated thunderstorms each afternoon. And those thunderstorms that are able to break the very warm cap that's going to be setting up over us could be rather severe, so we're going to have to keep an eye on that potential. But the main story from basically Thursday on through the weekend will be the hazy, hot, and humid weather conditions with temperatures near record levels and with a heat index that's going to exceed 100 degrees, possibly pushing as high as 110 degrees for some locations. So if you can stay indoors, please do. When does this heat wave break? Looking at sometime between Sunday night into Monday, we should get a strong enough cold front to move through to knock down the humidity and to produce temperatures more near normal. We're talking about mid to upper 80s, a few lower 90s. So we do eventually get a break from this heat wave, but we're going to have to get through the weekend and deal with a rather aggressive cold front on Monday morning. Thank you for trusting in NYNJPA weather as your severe weather source for the Northern Mid-Atlantic. I'll be keeping an eye on these thunderstorms, and you can keep track of them via Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, and of course at nynjpaweather.com. I'm your meteorologist, Stephen D. Martino. Have an excellent day.